Good afternoon, everyone. Great to see everybody here on a Friday at noon Eastern Time. Apologize for being a couple minutes late. Big Dog Brett, you can join him on YouTube as well. Big Georgia guy is going to join us. That was supposed to be at noon. He's now going to be coming in at 12:30. I thought I should jump on, of course, because this was scheduled at noon here at the Voice of College Football. Big news today. The biggest of news. Let's start with the headliner. The headliner is that Carson Strong, Nevada quarterback, going into the NFL draft, opted out for the bowl game for the Wolfpack, has been named the Voice of College Football Mountain West Offensive Player of the Year. So that has been released on Twitter in the last hour. Please check it out. Again, Carson Strong, Nevada quarterback, named Voice of College Football Mountain West Conference Offensive Player of the Year. We have announced our Conference Players of the Year, both sides of the ball. Let's see, now in the Big Ten on the offensive side, and both the Offensive and Defensive Players of the Year in the Sun Belt Conference. So we're releasing those several times a day on Twitter. And we're happy that our defensive selection in the Sun Belt Conference, that has been liked, that post, about 225 times last I saw, and retweeted about 30 times. So a lot of support there. So much appreciated out of all of you. So we're going to take your comments and questions. And of course, we're going to have Big Dog Brett here again at approximately 12:30 Eastern, as I promised a couple of days ago and first delivered on Thursday night. Live sessions here at the Voice of College Football all the way through the national championship game post game. So we went live last night for 3 hours. We are live right now. We may go live tonight. We've got a West Virginia show at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. So please subscribe to our West Virginia channel here at the Voice of College Football West Virginia. And we go live with the Gold and Blue Dude tonight at 8 o'clock Eastern Time on the West Virginia channel. You can also see that right here on the main channel. Saturday is pretty wide open, so we will be updating you on when we go live on Saturday. We will have to figure that out. And then on Sunday, the same deal. Water's good. And then on Monday, can you stand like 12 hours of me? Monday, noon until kickoff. Going live at noon Eastern Time on Monday, all the way to kickoff. And if there's anything that needs to be covered, so we constantly have transfer portal news and commits from the high school ranks, all sorts of news, offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, hirings and firings. So if you're not aware, on our team channels, we typically cover the news. So I may just have to cover that stuff live. So I may be cutting out at times just to say, for the next few minutes, we're going to bring in so-and-so, and we're going to talk about the transfer portal at Texas. But we will be live from noon Eastern Time on Championship Monday all the way up until kickoff. We will let you watch the game, and then we'll be back here live to take your calls. And since we'll be on about 8 hours on Monday, during the day, we'll take calls as well. Not the entire 8 hours. Josh is here. Good to see you, Josh. Jay is here as well. Good dogs. Josh is here asking, man, I would love to watch it play a whole season with. I would have loved to watch it, JT, play a whole season. Yeah. If only we could do that. If only we could live in alternate universes where we could say, oh, you could come up with a million scenarios, but that would be one. Georgia with Stetson Bennett played the entire season. JT Daniels at starting quarterback. Let's see them all both play out at the same time. What do we get? But life does not work like that. As most of us find out, as all of us find out, if we've got half a brain and consciousness and a conscience, that later in life we determine, I wish I would have done that and that and that. And had I known that, and if that person would have told me that, maybe some choices would have been different based on either our own screw-ups or the screw-ups of others. So today in the news, Derek Stingley, LSU cornerback, has entered the NFL draft or announced his decision to do so. No surprise there. Eli Ricks, the other top cornerback at LSU, now practicing with Alabama, as he has, of course, transferred just a few weeks ago to Alabama. And he's on the practice field, as we learned from a number of sources here, including Stephen M. Smith of Touchdown Alabama. You will see that conversation released here in the next day. Alabama, preparing for a national championship game, has two key transfers for 2022 already on campus and practicing with the team, and therefore they must be enrolled. I don't know how that would work. If the fall or the spring semester does not start until mid-January, I would think that those players would have had to be, obviously they were enrolled in fall semester at their previous schools, Georgia Tech and LSU, talking about Jahmyr Gibbs and Eli Ricks. So there must be some kind of rule that I wasn't necessarily aware of. I know that this has happened in the past, but it just didn't process, I guess, in regards to players transferring, and we're going to see this a lot more, players transferring mid-season or at the end of the season, especially for a losing team like Georgia Tech that did not qualify for a bowl game. And so their season was over the last weekend of November. And so the player transfers, goes to Alabama, Jahmyr Gibbs, and he's already in the practice field and obviously enrolled to be eligible, enrolled in school for the spring semester, even though they won't start classes until late January. We got David here. Okay. Look at that. David bought a Georgia tee to show his support of anyone to beat Alabama. Speaking of which, David, this is a little behind the scenes type talk here. Everything was set to roll yesterday. So what I did was I made a purchase on my site. So we're going to have merch available to all of you soon. Hang on. Not going to release anything yet because we're still working on some glitches. Been working on those glitches for a long, long time. But I wanted to make sure a transaction would go through smoothly before I announced anything. So I purchased my own merch to test out the process. And we're having more issues between the developer and the merchandising company. So we still have to work those out, but it would not take my transaction. So they are working on that. All right. Ricardo is more concerned about the TV ratings than the actual game. I know I'm reading into that statement, Ricardo, but Ricardo is interested, as I am too. Considering the magnitude of a bowl game, even though it is the Rose Bowl, the perception is more important at this point than anything else. Concerning the Rose Bowl, it involves conference champions, but doesn't determine anything. Not unlike it has in the past, but consider that we've got this big build up to the playoff, and everybody's talking playoff. And believe me, sitting in this chair and listening to all of your comments on the phone, reading the comments in the live chat, the comments that come to the channel through the videos, everybody's focused on the playoff. Obviously, I'm overstating that slightly. Not everybody, but the playoff garnishes. If somebody's talking about any other bowl game, it's because the bowl game is about to kick off or is in progress or has just ended. Otherwise, we weren't talking about any other bowl games. The bowl games, if there was a great bowl game, it was brought up that day. Otherwise, all playoff talk. I would love to talk more about the bowl games, but more playoff talk than anything else. So the hype, the attention, the focus, we live in a gold medal society. So all that matters to everyone is who is going to be the champion. I don't care who finishes number 11 or number 17. I do, but I'm kind of a nerd / freak when it comes to that. So what struck me was to see the television numbers of the Rose Bowl compared to the college football playoffs. I think this is astonishing. Of course, the Rose Bowl was a much better game than either playoff game. So it held the audience and probably built the audience. So the Rose Bowl, any year the Rose Bowl kicks off and there is a set number of people that I want to watch so you've got your set number of people that just, I'm watching the Rose Bowl. Doesn't matter who's playing in it. I watch the Rose Bowl every year, either because they're just college football nerds that watch everything, or they watch the major games, or there's probably still a small faction in this country that just are traditionalists and they're fringe football fans and they watch the Rose Bowl. Then, of course, as the game proceeds, it gains or loses audience based on the attraction of the game, the competitiveness of the game. This one was through the roof. And so I'm sure it gained a rating. And I'm sure that if you look at the rating that was roughly a 16, I'd have to look at, I don't know what the rating was exactly. It was 16.6 million viewers. So how that translates to a rating now, I used to have that all calculated up here, but it has to do with the population, the TV population of the country, and also the population of the country, which is almost exactly the same because almost everyone has a television. But to cut through all the metrics, the Rose Bowl had the same numbers as the first college football playoff game, Alabama, Cincinnati. Same people, same number of people watching the games. Ohio State's a big draw. The Rose Bowl's a big draw. Utah is not a big draw. I'm sure the state of Utah was locked in. But other than that, people that aren't college football people, I'm sorry, Utah, they don't recognize Utah as being a college football brand. So Ohio State draws the audience, and the Rose Bowl, of course, and then the competitiveness of the game. I'm sure a lot of people tuned in the third quarter and were like, this is a good football game. Let's watch it. I know a lot of people that just like football, but they don't have great allegiances. So if they turn on a game and it's 28-0, they're out. But they turn on a game and it's 28-all, and they're going to watch. And so the playoff game, Alabama, Cincinnati, and the Rose Bowl, identical TV numbers. And then the second playoff game, consider we had two brands, big brands in Georgia and Michigan, plus it was the primetime game. And it only did slightly better than the Rose Bowl. So, Ricardo, I think you're on to something. There are going to be people that love college football, and I might get some argument here because by definition, if you love college football, then you're going to watch any national championship game. I've watched every national championship game that's ever existed, of course. But I could understand in this day and age of entertainment and other options and things to do that you're like, I love college football and I'm I'm a TCU fan, and I just don't want to watch this game. I'll watch the highlights, or if it turns into a great game, I'll tune in late. But man, there are so many entertainment options out there now that, yeah, Georgia and Alabama are two states, two contiguous states right next to each other in the deep South, and the rest of the country. We did have Cincinnati. I find it interesting to pinpoint the location of the four playoff teams. In a perfect world, for the good of college football, we would have a team from the SEC. We'd have a team from the Big Ten. We'd have a team from the Pac-12. And then probably the Big 12. And probably what would be good for the sport is to have maybe 3 heavy name brands and then 1 wild card. Like, not the boring lineup of Alabama, Ohio State, Oklahoma, and Clemson, but not I don't know what the ratings would do if it turned out to be, let's see, Mississippi State, Wake Forest, Purdue, and Stanford. I don't know what would happen then. I tend to believe that a mixture of the two people would be intrigued by. It was Alabama, USC, Purdue, and NC State. But who knows? I love looking at TV ratings. I don't do it much anymore. I'm not in the habit of looking at the college football or the sports TV ratings. They used to be in my email every day at work, so I didn't have to think about it. Now I go for months and months and don't think about it, but I am going to produce a video about TV ratings in college football, at least one. Okay. Mike T, I have no dog in this hunt, but odds have Bama to win it. Maine 76 says it's hard to enjoy a rematch. I can understand that. I think it's different in the NFL because if there's a rematch, let's say in the Super Bowl, the two teams played in the regular season. I can think of a few times that happened. And then they played in the Super Bowl. Those teams had to, not that these two teams, Georgia and Alabama, have not earned it, but they only earned it with 1 win. And we all saw it coming, as opposed to just having to really earn it through the course of an entire bracket to get there and think, okay, well, these teams played in October. Raiders, Eagles, 1980. Played in like October. It's 3 months later. They're playing at the Super Bowl, but they had to go through a lot to get there. Josh asks, how do you think if players were to be getting paid, how would you specifically want to do it, and how coaches or just the college will give out the money to their players or recruits? Well, Josh, I do not believe that the players should be paid for 2 reasons in particular. One would be they're already getting paid, and this is even before NIL. So even before NIL started this past July, the players were getting paid. How were they getting paid, Mark? They received a scholarship. And I know so many people that have argued about a scholarship, and it's not this and it's not that, and it's not real money, and that's not really like getting paid. No, it's like getting paid. It's worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. So I've made this statement in the past. It's become even more real to me having a daughter who was paying student loans off. So she received grants and partial scholarships and so forth, and still just met with a lot of student loan debt. So don't tell me that that's not worth anything. That's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. So they're getting paid. Their scholarship is payment. And it's not just in education, it's room and board and food. They are getting paid. If somebody told me tomorrow, Mark, we're going to pay for everything. We're going to pay for your business. We're going to pay for your utilities and your groceries and your food and dining out and pay for your house and everything. But you're not getting paid. Those bills will come directly to us. I'd think that that was a pretty sweet deal. I'd say, and I would consider that I was being paid. Okay, so that's number one. Number two, now that we do have NIL, the players have the opportunity to get paid by outside organizations, companies. So we just opened up a windfall for these guys, and rightfully so. They should have that opportunity like anybody else in the United States. So why do we need to pay them? Like formally pay them when they're being paid anyway? They have all those opportunities. So Peanut Butter Hero's a Southerner, so the Rose Bowl, not a big deal to him. That's understandable. That is understandable. So to me, growing up in the Midwest, the Rose Bowl was everything. The Sugar Bowl, Cotton Bowl, Orange Bowl, those I still recognize as a big deal, and I wanted to watch them, but not quite the Rose Bowl. Yeah, John, that's a good point about New Year's Eve. And we talked about that with Gary Harris, WVUA. Check out that video. Gary is always a great listen on Alabama football and, of course, this national championship game. But I presented the same conversation and question to him about the nation being turned off by Alabama, Georgia. And we talked about the TV ratings. And yes, New Year's Eve, we need to get off of New Year's Eve for the playoff games. I think that's been proven. But there we go. Peanut Butter Hero. Mark is not a fan of the ACC. I am not a fan nor a critic of the ACC. Whatever football you deliver to me is the football I'm going to watch, evaluate, analyze, and deliver an opinion on. And the ACC has been pretty horrendous for quite some time. 2016 was a great year for the ACC, at which point I stated, for anyone who criticizes my criticism of the ACC, is I will, again, I'm on record. You can go back and look at the videos. The ACC in 2016 played the best football in the nation. Now, I didn't necessarily deem it to be the best conference. I said that the SEC was still the best conference, but if you just looked at the results on the field, the ACC was actually better than the SEC in 2016. Since then, a rapid tumble downhill. All right, we got Big Dog Brett on the line.
Hey, how's it going, Mark?
Going well. How you doing?
Trying to stay warm. Us dogs ain't used to this cold weather.
Well, I know it gets a little rainy and icy there in Georgia. Come on, a little bit.
It was
A little bit in the winter.
it was 18 this morning.
Ooh, oh, I didn't know that cold. I was thinking like 40.
No, it was 18 this morning. I think the wind chill was 14. So
Okay.
it was a little chilly.
Yeah. I was telling somebody this morning, I said, because they were complaining it's cold and it was 41 there. They were complaining that it was freezing. And I said, well, there's cold and then there's cold. And then as I found out last night, not that I didn't know this, but I was talking to our Miami guy who's in North Dakota. Seems kind of strange, but he's a graduate assistant in North Dakota who showed me his phone. And I was complaining because he's like, how cold is it there? And I said, I don't know. It's 25. And I looked it up. I said, well, it's 29. He shows me his phone. Negative 21.
Oof. No, thank you. Pass. Hard pass.
Unbelievable. So how you doing?
Doing great.
Great.
The last I used to live in Nebraska, and the last year that I lived there, the coldest day that winter, it was negative 19. The wind chill was around negative 38. They had broadcasts on the radio and on the television that a minute and a half of exposed skin would result in frostbite. And the city was fining people for not shoveling the sidewalk. Yeah. So
that doesn't really add up.
Yeah. not a whole lot of people out there walking. So, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. I grew up in the Midwest, so I'm used to winter weather and cold. But then I hear about that kind of cold and generally didn't grow up in that. A lot of 25-degree days growing up in Ohio in the winter, but not the just unbelievably brutal cold. Well,
the good news is that during the game, the temperature should be in the mid 20s, somewhere around there. So they're going to be playing inside, so maybe it won't be too bad.
Oh yeah, I would think that they would set that at like 68. Sounds like a good temperature to set that dome at.
Yeah,
Something
that'd be
in
good.
that range, 70. Yep. My dad took me to a Detroit Lions Minnesota Vikings game in Detroit in December when I was 8 years old, because I was a big Minnesota Vikings fan when I first started watching football. And it was a blizzard out. It was one of those, not to your extent, but it was like 5 below or 10 below outside. And but we were in the Silver Dome, and my dad's like, my dad being a real old timer wasn't used to dome. He's like, this just isn't right. It's like guys playing football in their living room. And he's like, look at the scoreboard. It's telling us it's 72 degrees in here.
Wow. It's incredible.
Yeah. All right, man. So I will say this first and foremost, everybody check out Big Dog Brett's YouTube channel. So head on over there. It's Big Dog Brett. I'll get his banner up here in just a second. Big Dog Brett right here on YouTube. So especially Georgia fans, if you like Georgia football, you have to be over there. But even if you're anybody in the SEC or around college football that just wants to check out a good take, head on over there. First thing that comes to mind is that, of course, we had you on before the Michigan game. And that you took some flack from some people, of course, Michigan fans in particular, about your confidence level and how you separated the two teams. Well, I think we pretty much saw it play out, pretty much exact in regards to the talent gap there. There were things that could have been done by Michigan, and we can go into development of players, and we can go into strategy. And I rewatched the first half because I wanted to get a clear indication of, okay, I'm watching the first half over because that is what really mattered, because it was over after that. And I was also going on a Michigan podcast. So I wanted to be knowledgeable of just not remembering the first watch. So I watched the first half again, and I wanted to kind of take account every play. Am I evaluating this play as Georgia won this play because of talent? They were too fast, too strong, too whatever, or somebody missed a throw, or It was a dumb coaching decision, or I don't agree with that play call kind of thing. And by and large, certainly there were some things that Michigan did that I didn't agree with, but by and large, it was just there's a difference in having 19 5-stars and having 3 5-stars.
I would completely agree. I really caught a lot of heat from Michigan fans, and I mean a lot of heat. I think it was their first time having an exchange with an SEC fan that was not a what's the word I'm looking for here, was not catering to the Michigan fan base. I just I called it the way that I saw it, and I thought talent was going to be a problem, even though they do have a lot of talented players. I just think that when we saw the size and speed difference against Georgia, it was pretty easy to see that. I mean, when you've got wide receivers like George Pickens who can basically ragdoll toss one of their defensive backs like he did, that should have been an indication of the real differences, because wide receivers are not known for being physical powerhouses. They're just not. And that Michigan player, he got tossed. And being a sports fan and being a college football fan, there is a bit of homerism that goes along with rooting for your team, but at some point you have to at least be somewhat objective. Otherwise, nobody's going to listen to you other than Georgia fans or whatever your team is. Watching the way the Michigan fan base completely disappeared. I think there was 3 people that came back and said, good game. Kind of made me smile a little bit. I was kind of surprised about it. Alabama fans, even if they beat you, some of them are trash talking. That's fine. And some will say, you know what, you guys played a good game. Or whenever we played against so-and-so, that wasn't your best game. You guys did a great job against Michigan. You get a full gambit from them. But that was my first interaction with Michigan fans, and they kind of disappeared after the game was over. So I wish they'd come back around and just kind of have an analytical breakdown.
Yeah, absolutely. And we had our Michigan guy, Justin Rowe, on yesterday, and we've yet to release that. And he wasn't and did not make any excuses. He saw the obvious gap between the two teams. And he actually, even before the game, he thought that Michigan had a chance. He thought that Georgia was better. He thought Michigan would have to play a close to a perfect game. I still come away with that, having watched what I watched, but also knowing other results from the two teams and knowing how good the teams are that they played. We saw the Big Ten and the SEC matchup in 3 other games, so you can draw other conclusions. And then also knowing the gap in talent, where Michigan pretty much has as many 4-stars as Georgia. We would have to comb through. There's quite a sizable, lengthy list of 4-stars. You can be a top 50 player as a 4-star. You can be a top 450 players of 4-stars. So we'd have to weed through that. And I would guess that Georgia's quality of 4-stars would be higher than Michigan's, but still a lot of 4-stars on the field on both teams, and a lot of NFL players on the Michigan side. Now, again, the quality of NFL player, there's a difference there. Probably it's like 2 years ago, roughly. I remember having an exchange with some Michigan folks because Michigan had 10 NFL players drafted and Ohio State had 10 NFL players drafted. Well, all of Michigan's players were drafted in the 5th and 6th rounds, and Ohio State had 2 of the top 3 players in the draft and 4 players in the top 20. And so all their players were drafted near the top of the board, and Michigan's were. So yeah, it was 10 and 10, but there was a difference there. And so yeah, there are quality players on Michigan's. They'll earn a lot of money in the NFL. Daxton Hill just declared for the NFL draft, and he's like the number 2 safety in the country. But when you look at waves and waves of players, obviously we saw the difference. So the last point I'll make, because we want to focus, of course, on Alabama, is that that game didn't surprise me. I didn't expect it, but it didn't surprise me. I may have made the comment to you because I made it several times. I said, if this game's 45-14, it's not going to surprise me. Georgia won 45-14, and it played out like it did. But I do think that if the teams played multiple times, we would see different games and closer games. Not necessarily close games, but closer games. So that's all I'll say about that.
I think that I think what we saw out of Michigan, we had some. They do have quality players. I'm not saying they're Vanderbilt. I'm not saying that. I'm saying they've got some quality players. I think that their game plan was a bit of a mistake. I can understand and respect the fact that they wanted to stick to what they knew they had been successful with, which was trying to run the ball. However, when you have something that's a strength versus strength, and no one has shown any, superhuman ability to just run the ball all over Georgia in the past 3 years, under the same coach, I would say that's probably a game plan that needs to be tweaked a little bit. I understand they might not have had the greatest confidence in their quarterback for having him throw the ball 20 or 30 or 40 times. But I think after the first quarter or even the first half, seeing how well Georgia had efficiently stopped the run, it was probably a time to try to make a different game plan. And they never could catch up. Georgia's defense was flying all over the field. Nakobe Dean looked like a lightning bolt. There was one play in particular where he started all the way, and I'll say at the bottom of the screen to make it easy for some people. He started at the bottom of the screen and ended at the top of the screen, and the running back who got the ball never gained a yard. Matter of fact, I think he lost a half a yard. And Nakobe Dean, to cover that much ground that quickly, read the play, knew the play. I didn't see any defensive plays like that from Michigan all night. And so it was interesting.
I remember the play you're talking about. It was Blake Corum. And I even thought, it went through my mind at the time, that sometimes you'll see quarterbacks on some of these dump offs just kind of lay it out there, which gives the defense a split more second of time to get over there. But I think Cade McNamara, knowing how fast this defense was, actually he threw he got the ball out of his hand quick and threw a bullet to him to try to get the ball out there to him as fast as possible. And Nakobe Dean still just did a beeline and just dropped him.
That, to me, that's one of the things. I'll go back to the coaching aspect of it. This was a play that Nakobe Dean had clearly watched on film. He knew what this play was going to be from before the time the ball was snapped. He was already full speed, had abandoned his coverage protection that he was supposed to do, knew the ball was going to this guy. And as they say, damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead. This is where I'm going. And by the time the ball was snapped, Nakobe Dean was already at full speed. The ball came out quick, and he never had a chance to make the corner. Nakobe Dean in open field tackled him perfectly. And that should have been a play that, even though Jim Harbaugh had practiced a million times, they should have found a way to tweak that, give us a different look of that same play, but not do that. And then the next second or third time, do that. Then you have Nakobe Dean completely out of place and exposed. Then you can make a big play on that in 2 or 3 possessions later.
Is there anything that happened on New Year's Eve that made you feel or think any differently about Georgia?
Me? Yes.
Yeah.
Specifically Stetson Bennett's quarterback play. This was the best game that he has played all year. There was times whenever he knew that if he stood in the pocket and threw the ball, he was going to take a lick. He knew it, and he did it anyway and made a great pass. He knew he was going to get popped, and he said, fine, I'm going to take it, and I'm going to make this pass. And there were several good passes that he made where whenever the camera scanned back to Stetson Bennett, you saw him getting up off the ground. Now, typically when a quarterback, the first couple of those, he'll start to get a little squirrely on the back end after he's been popped 3 or 4 times. That didn't happen. He stood in the pocket, he made the pass, took the lick, and was completely okay with it. And the passes that he was throwing, with the exception of maybe I think 1 or 2, they weren't behind the receiver. James Cook didn't have to slow down to catch a ball. He was hitting guys in stride. He really hasn't done that all year, which has led to the idea that he has a noodle arm. This particular game, These were great passes. They were where they needed to be. There were times whenever he knew he was going to get blitzed that he could have tried to scramble and just chose to actually throw the ball instead. So I think this showed a much more mature Stetson Bennett than what we had seen. And if we can see that kind of maturity in him in the Alabama game, that'll be much more of a contest than what we saw before.
So, folks, we appreciate the comments and the questions here in the live chat. And again, catch Brett on his YouTube channel, Big Dog Brett, and I'll have the banner up there from time to time throughout the stream. I am not ignoring your questions if they deal with just playoff expansion and some big topics like that, but we want to focus on the Alabama-Georgia matchup in particular. If we have time, we'll get to that, but we just have a certain amount of time here, so we want to focus on the matchup against Alabama. So there are a lot of questions out there that we can address for the next 7 months. So let's focus on the game Monday night. So, man, this is from a talent perspective, you know, you made your analysis of the Michigan game. That was apparent. This is a whole different deal in regards to not the 15th most talented team in the country, the first or second most talented team in the country. So we have two teams that from a talent standpoint, it's a toss-up. It's all about psychology. So how do you read into the psychology? I try not to, but of course it's part of it. So you got to try to take your guess at what's going through the minds of these players.
Well, I think there's a lot to be said for when you look across the history of college football. There's a reason why an undefeated season is so impressive. And I'll have to double check this stat, but I would be willing to bet there's more teams that have taken a loss in a season than there is undefeated teams that have taken a loss in the season and won a national championship. So teams with one loss winning a national championship versus undefeated teams winning a national championship. I would wager to say it would be more inclined to have a one-loss national champ.
Oh, absolutely.
And I think that's because there's an opportunity for you to get humbled and get galvanized. And I think that's what happened to Georgia. I think everybody was really questioning after the Alabama game, what Georgia team are we going to see come back against Michigan? And that particular game, not only did Georgia bounce back, it bounced back against a Big Ten champion, and it bounced back in a big way. It wasn't just a win. It was a dominant win, and it was a dominant win in a big game on a big stage on the road. Short of winning a national championship, there's not a better victory Georgia has had, I think, under Kirby Smart. Now, you could say winning an SEC championship, maybe, but an SEC championship is great. But I think that Georgia losing that game was a great punch in the mouth for the moral fortitude that was needed to go out and win this game against Alabama. Georgia not only showed the nation that, it could perform, it showed itself that it could perform. They convinced themselves that they could go out and win big games. You can no longer say that Georgia can't win a big game, because if that's not a big game, I don't know what is. So going into the Alabama-Georgia game, again, I think that most Georgia players and most Georgia fans and most objective fans will tell you that, yes, even though Alabama beat Georgia before, I would almost say that was more of a one-off for both teams than it was what would have been predicted looking at those two teams through the season. I think that Georgia almost thought they were just going to win that game with no problem. They came out, they looked bad, they looked sloppy, they played worse, and they gave that game away. Alabama came out to play and did a great job. Hats off to those guys. But coming back and beating Michigan in the manner they did, I think the loss galvanized Georgia. I think a big victory against Michigan re-galvanized them even more, made them more hungry, and proved to themselves that they are a good quality football team. And that's really what makes or breaks some teams. Is how they respond that following game after a heartbreaking loss.
So, Brett, keep me honest on the time. We got Brett for, I think, about a half hour. So leave your comments and questions. We got John here. And the only thing I'll say about the rematch, and people have their different theories about a rematch, is that check out the video I posted yesterday, John, because it's a no-nonsense. I don't even talk. It's just I give you every meaningful rematch in college football in the last 50 years, and I threw out Central Michigan and Purdue rematching in the Little Caesars Pizza Bowl. No, they're all Rose Bowl game. They're either national championship games or they are games. And I would have even questioned maybe some major bowl games now because of the opt-out situation. But we're talking about 20 years ago, and nobody opted out, and a Rose Bowl game or an Orange Bowl game, et cetera. Anyway, you will see they're all top 5 matchups. And throughout the last 50 years, there's 40 of them. And you may or may not be surprised by the results. And I don't think it really even proves anything. It's just, I don't think it proves one way or the other that, the team that won the first game is better, so they're just going to win the next game, or proves that, well, it's tough to beat a team twice, so that's never going to happen. You're always going to split. It doesn't prove either one because every situation is different. So, Brett, I'll let you take it from here, but I definitely want to get your thoughts about different matchups that intrigue you.
I think one is that we have to approach the topic of having 2 SEC teams in a national championship. We have to talk about that.
Okay.
And I think that in and of itself shows you that both of these teams are extremely high quality. I don't, and you might, but I don't know right off the top of my hand, is there, since the college football playoff era, has there been 2 teams in the same conference besides Georgia and Alabama that have played in the championship?
No.
So just twice in the entire history of the college football playoff have you had 2 teams in the same conference play each other. That should show you that there's quite a bit of a talent level, and that's because both of those teams can consistently perform. When you have that kind of talent and they play each other, back to back in the same season, it's hard to say this team's definitely going to win or that team's definitely going to win, because you've got 2 really good football teams. If we take a little bit of look at other sports, even football and pro, you play the same team twice every season, and it's not uncommon to split those games. It's not uncommon at all, and that means even bad teams can beat really good teams. They play them a second time or even the first time. So it's not a surprise to see if one team wins or loses a second go around. So that the ideology that, they beat them the first time, they'll beat them again, that doesn't pan out. If you take a look at baseball is the epitome of proving this to be wrong. That's why that's why the World Series has 7 games. I think it's only happened a handful of times that any team has ever swept the World Series. And baseball's been around for how many years?
Sure.
So
the thing I'll say to that, Brett, is that to further your point about the playoff, let's even take it through the BCS era. So we've had a national championship game since 1998. So we've had 23 of them. The SEC's only had the one other, in addition to Georgia, Alabama, which was not a repeat, but it was 2 SEC teams in the championship game. Alabama, LSU were playing a rematch in 2011. Alabama won the championship after LSU won the regular season game. Other than that, no 2 teams have rematched in the BCS or been from the same conference even since 1998. My only thought about the baseball analogy would be that I'll say that I think your analogy works better using the NBA, because in baseball, the pitcher determines a lot. So you got a different starting pitcher each night, and they control the game. But in the NBA, we see it all the time. Look at the NBA finals. You'll see 2 teams that for any rational person that doesn't understand sports, they're a rational person, they would think, you got the same 2 teams. They just played last night, same players, same coaches. You should have the same result. And one night, one team will win by 12, and the next night they lose by 15. Like,
yep. What happened? It's one of those things where there's a lot of people out there right now that are saying, there's no point in playing this game. Alabama already beat them one time. And you really don't have to point that far back in history to, Auburn beat Georgia and Alabama in back-to-back weeks. And then Georgia lost to Auburn initially, and then Georgia goes to the SEC championship and absolutely demolishes Auburn. That's just the way it went. So that would seem to immediately throw out the idea that that doesn't necessarily dictate anything.
And neither of those games were close.
No.
Yeah.
Georgia got beat pretty bad by Auburn, and then the flip side of the coin, Georgia beat Auburn pretty bad the second go around. Yeah. It would almost seem to suggest that you almost don't want to play a team a second time in the SEC. And I don't know the stats specifically. I'd have to check it, but I think it's a little more one-sided in the SEC that if you play a team a second go around, that you would tend to lose if you won the first one. But I'd have to check.
So a lot of the results that I went to, so I went through major bowl games, but I also did conference championship games because obviously there's a huge incentive there. It's again, not just some third tier bowl game that you can't really gauge the results. There were 7, I'd have to dig up again, inconclusive. I think there was 7 SEC championship games that were rematches, and it was a 3-4 split. Like 3 were a sweep, 4 were a split. It doesn't show you anything.
So
who knows?
Yeah. So basically what we're saying is that stat doesn't, that ideology doesn't tell us anything. It's a coin flip either way. So for me, I would much rather play the Alabama team that we're seeing now than some of the Alabama teams we have seen in the past. Some of the Alabama teams we have seen in the past have been absolutely extremely dominant all season, steamrolled everybody. I think that the youngness of Bryce Young is beneficial to anybody playing him. And if they have players out, if they have offensive linemen out, which looks to be the case, that plays into the benefit of Georgia. Now, I don't want any player to be hurt. I want both teams to play at full capacity. Unfortunately, that's just not the reality. So you have to play it the way it lies, like in golf. But if I was going to play an Alabama team, even if we lose, this would be the one I'd have to pick.
Well, they showed against some of the better teams on their schedules, or at least some of the more talented teams on their schedules before Georgia, LSU, and Auburn. Those were the 2 games that I was the most taken back by, watching Alabama's offense just struggle. The offensive line just get dominated by LSU and especially Auburn. Auburn stalemated them for 3 points for up until the last minute of the game. 3 points.
Now, I think there is a lot to be said for the quality of a quarterback that Bryce Young is. The guy is an outstanding quarterback. There's no doubt in my mind.
Yeah,
he's pulled out a couple of wins for him, and the question is that if Georgia's defense shows up to play the way it has showed up in every game except the SEC championship game, what kind of environment does that create? Because now Georgia will have the ball more. Georgia was already able to score 24 points against Alabama with limited performance from the defense. So if Georgia is able to amp up the defense just a little and create more opportunity for the offense, this can suddenly become a much closer game than what people realize. Now, I know a 41-point to 24-point swing sounds like a lot. But if you take into consideration that if Georgia gets one more possession and they're able to score on it, and that takes one scoring possession away from Alabama, suddenly you have a 34-31 game. It's a lot closer than people realize. So to me, I'm looking at if the defense can show up and create some damage, it could be a lot closer game than what people think.
Well, Georgia is the favorite, but yeah, to your point, I know that a lot of people just figure Alabama's going to repeat the same performance. So we talked about Alabama's struggles and when they looked bad, but obviously not against Georgia. So they face a really good defensive front in Auburn and LSU, like top 10 to 15 fronts in the country. But then they face the best front in the country. They put up 41 points, and obviously they exposed the secondary and all that. So Alabama has shown its ceiling. And then they went back to being a pretty conservative team against Cincinnati, but they kind of just did what they needed to do in that game. So I just can't imagine that Alabama is going to expose Georgia quite the extent in this game that they did the first game. But at the same time, this is the best offense that Georgia's faced all year by far.
Oh, there's no doubt about that. There's no doubt about that whatsoever. What I would say, though, is that I don't feel like Georgia's game plan going into the Alabama game, the SEC championship game, was what we all had seen all year. I think that Georgia's ideology was to drop the linebackers back and kind of cover the secondary a little better and make Bryce Young beat him with his arm. And he's good enough that he did. We saw a lot more cushion. We didn't see press coverage. We saw a lot more cushion in the game. And so when you've got elite receivers out there and you have a Heisman Trophy winning quarterback, that was not a recipe for success. I think this time you'll see Georgia be much more interested in getting pressure on Bryce Young. I've watched him in other games where they were able to pressure him. Other teams that don't have as good a defense as Georgia were able to get some pressure on Bryce Young. And granted, he still made some throws. He still made some great plays, but he didn't make as near as many as when you give him time to throw. Georgia has traditionally done a great job of containing dual threat quarterbacks. And that might have been the ideology they had, was trying to contain Bryce Young, limit his running ability, and make him throw. The problem is that if he makes the throws, there's nothing you can do because some balls just can't be stopped. A perfectly thrown pass cannot be blocked, can't be knocked down, and the receiver's going to catch it. And that's what he was throwing. So I think in order to defeat that, Georgia has to dial up the pressure, and they have to play a lot more aggressive than what we saw.
We appreciate everybody being here at the Voice of College Football. Please like the video and make sure that you spread the word, whether that's sharing the links out there on social media or just letting people know that we're here talking college football with you every day. We got Big Dog Brett on the line from YouTube. Just head on over there. Just put it right there in the search bar, Big Dog Brett, and you'll track his videos talking Georgia football. So have you produced any preview videos?
I believe that I was holding off on that. I've got one where I did a video with Chip Towers. Chip Towers is the resident reporter for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution down here, and Chip Towers has been covering the University of Georgia football team and the Atlanta Braves for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution since I think 2009. He was on the show and he gave us some pretty good information. So that's the closest I've come to actually putting out a video for that. The upcoming video is going to come out this weekend. That particular video is going to be an in-depth video where I'm going to go through and kind of break down what I think from the offense on both teams, what I think from the defense on both teams, who the playmakers should be and could be, what the offensive plans should be for each team, defensive plans for each team, as well as, the injuries, who's in, who's out. One thing I do want to point out, though, is that regardless of whatever my prediction video is, I'm going to try and call this game as accurate as I think I can. I'm not going to pick Georgia just because I'm a Georgia fan. I can pick Georgia every game, and eventually, I'll be wrong. But if I pick Georgia to lose every game, I'll be wrong a lot more often. So if I pick Georgia to win, I'm not picking Georgia to win because I'm a Georgia homer and I expect that, on average, they win these games. If I pick Georgia to win, I've got to come up with a legitimate reason why I think Georgia can beat a team that they've lost 7 straight to. And why do I think that? To me, the best indicator of future performance is past performance. And the question is what past performance do you measure? Do you measure the loss? Do you measure Georgia's dominating defense all year? Do you measure that, Alabama has more Heisman Trophy winners recently than Georgia? Do you measure the overall dominance that they've had in college football? How do you measure that? So that's one of the things I've got to break down. But one of the things that I do want to point out is I think that a lot of Georgia fans have given Stetson Bennett a bad shake here. I think we've looked at his past performance over the years and went, man, golly, we've got a walk-on and we've got 2, 3, 5 stars sitting on the bench. Why is Stetson Bennett playing? So I want to put this out there for both Alabama fans and Georgia fans and just college football in general. If I asked you, which quarterback do you think has the most passing yards per completion? That is a Power 5 team. Who would you guess?
Which team
No,
in the
which
country?
team or which quarterback? Which quarterback has the most passing yards per completion
In all of Power 5 football?
Mm-hmm.
I thought you were asking between JT Daniels and Stetson Bennett. Okay. Well,
Okay, that's fine. You can answer that one too.
okay. So yeah, you were going in the same direction I thought. So Stetson Bennett does.
Yeah.
And I
Stetson
know this
Bennett.
because I looked at the
Yeah.
stats, but
So,
also because you're leading us that way. So
yeah. So Stetson Bennett is number 4 in the country overall, and he's behind FIU, Coastal Carolina, and UTEP.
yeah, their competition.
Yeah. And then Alabama at Bryce Young is ranked 30th. If we look at passing efficiency, Stetson Bennett is also ranked number 4th, but Bryce Young is ranked number 5. So I think it's unfair to Stetson Bennett to say he's not a good quarterback, because if you actually jump into the stats and you look at it, he's actually a really good quarterback. It's just that we as Georgia fans have this stigmatism that he's a walk-on and there's a 5-star on the bench and, he's made some mistakes. I think we're overanalyzing the bad things and we're not recognizing the good things. Stetson Bennett is more than capable of winning this game. Cherry picking stats, Uncle Rico says, sir, there's not many other stats you can pick from. There's passing efficiency, passing yards per completion, and then like overall passing yards. Well, efficiency is really one of the things that a lot of coaches look for. How efficient are you with the football? Because when you throw the ball, what am I going to get out of it versus if I hand it off? Because every time you throw the ball, that means you can't hand it off. So you have to weigh that out. When you've got running backs 4, 5 deep at Georgia that are 4 and 5 stars, you have to have a really good reason to pass the ball. And if you're going to pass the ball, you're going to want to make sure that it's efficient, that you're getting something, you're getting a return on that investment. And if you're not getting a return on that investment, you're just going to hand it off.
Yeah, yards per attempt or yards per completion. You can go either statistic. They're slightly different for different reasons. Obviously, the pass per attempt or the yards per attempt will also factor in the completion percentage, and that factors into it. But the yards per completion just on the balls that are completed. But that it's a reason why a lot of people that break down football, that know a lot about football, go to that number, because that tracks the effectiveness of your passing game. How much are you getting out of the passing game?
Well, I think if we go back and we look at, I think it was Joe Burrow, he was averaging, I think it was like at one point he was averaging 18 yards a pass. It's just some insane number.
Yeah.
And you go, wow, 18 yards a pass. That's incredible. And then you turn around and you look and you go, Stetson Bennett's throwing for almost 16 yards a pass. And Joe Burrow demolished everybody and won a national championship. And I think he won the Heisman. Did he win the Heisman?
Yes. Those are
he
pass
won the
completions.
Heisman. Yeah. And I'm not talking about pass per attempt.
Yeah.
I'm talking about actual completions.
Yeah.
So I think it's unfair to think that Stetson Bennett is a bad quarterback. The stats clearly bear out a different story than that.
I never thought he was a bad quarterback. I always thought that he made 2 or 3 mistakes, which everybody makes mistakes. So
right.
I go to this line a lot because I think way too many people, at least that watch my channel, watch too much Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers on Sunday and expect college quarterbacks to throw like that, where they're pretty much flawless. Every college quarterback's going to miss on 5, 6, 7, 8 throws a game. If they're throwing the ball 35 or 40 times, they're going to miss on some throws.
Well,
That's not many.
No. And if we look at,
there's a difference between missing a throw and making a bad mistake, though. And so Stetson would make those 2 or 3 bad mistakes per game.
And if you look at, let me back up a second here. If you look at most of the teams in college football, I mean, for goodness sake, we've got quarterbacks in New Year's Six bowls that were throwing for less than 50%. And those are the teams that are making New Year's Six bowls. So
we do.
I think Ole Miss quarterback had less than a 50% stat, didn't he?
Not their starting quarterback.
Oh, he's still a quarterback in a bowl game.
Well, yeah, that came in for Matt Corral, maybe.
Oh, now you're cherry picking stats.
Well, their starting quarterback got hurt like in the first drive of the game, the second drive of the game.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, maybe their backup quarterback at Ole Miss, but certainly not Matt Corral. He's one of the best quarterbacks in the country, so he doesn't have a less than 50% completion percentage.
Speaking of which, Matt Corral, fortunately, it only ended up being a sprained ankle. So
yeah,
pretty excited for that guy, because I mean, if you ever watched Matt Corral play, man, the guy is just an incredible talent. I would really like to have seen what he could have done with a team that had a little more talent. So, but yeah. As far as the stats go, when you've got a quarterback who's throwing, 65%, he's not getting sacked a whole lot. And just to point this out, I think you have to compare apples to apples. So if you look at Stetson Bennett's completion percentage is like 64.5%. Bryce Young's is 67.5%. So a 3% difference. So 3 more balls out of 100 Bryce Young makes. Now, Bryce Young has thrown for 46 touchdowns and 5 interceptions, which is better than Stetson Bennett throwing for 27 and 7. The big factor I want to point out here, though, is that Stetson Bennett has been sacked 9 times, and Bryce Young has been sacked 35. 0 of those sacks come from Georgia. So if Georgia can play the kind of football that it should be playing, Georgia should be able to sack Bryce Young. He should be able to interrupt the passing, and it should be a very interesting game.
It should be. It should be fascinating. I don't expect a 17-point spread either way. Again, I expect it to be tight, but we shall see. And again, history tells us that do not bank on a split and do not bank on a sweep. It just doesn't show us one way or the other. It shows us that it's a brand new ball game, and it's definitely the 2 best teams in the country and 2 evenly matched teams from a talent perspective.
I'm looking forward to seeing if Georgia is going to make the adjustment on defense. If Georgia is able to make the adjustment on defense, and there's no reason to think they won't, it really should be a dominant performance by UGA. If UGA shows up and plays just as good a defense as Auburn did, and it creates that kind of environment, I would have to lean more towards Georgia. I believe Georgia can score at least 21 to 24 points because we've done that already. I don't see their defense making any big changes enough to stop Georgia's offense, because Georgia's offense is just based off of efficiency. That's where we've been so good this year on offense, is just being consistent. I think that the defense was the big problem. Stetson Bennett threw a pick 6 and another interception that really hurt Georgia. If he doesn't do that and he plays efficiently, this should be Georgia's game.
I think that our guy Malari makes a pretty valid point here. He says, Stetson Bennett's a good quarterback, but do good quarterbacks beat Nick Saban? It's usually Johnny Manziel, Trevor Lawrence, Deshaun Watson, Cam Newton, Tim Tebow. Great college quarterbacks.
I agree, but I also
Although I can think of not to interrupt. I'm sorry.
No, you're good.
I can think of 2 decent Ole Miss quarterbacks that beat Alabama in 2014 and 15, Chad Kelly and Bo Wallace. So they did it.
There's there's a lot to be said out there for
Or Zach Calzada this year. I'm sorry,
yeah.
Brett.
No, you're good, man. Zach Calzada is definitely a quarterback that nobody, I would say, expected to beat Alabama, but we were all kind of shock and awe. I thought that was going to be the turning point for Alabama to become much more dominant throughout the season. And to see them continue to have some of the games they had, I was really surprised. They came out and they lost that game by 3 points. And that particular game was not even the most passing yards that Bryce Young had all season. He had some games where he had, far more yards. I don't know. I'm just not used to seeing Alabama play that way. And so that made me question what was going to happen the rest of the season. Texas A&M came out and won this game with 41 points, but they only had 285 yards in passing, which is not earth-shattering. They only had 94 yards in rushing. Now, Zach Calzada went for 21 to 31. So he's right around that, 64, 65%, nothing super elite. Maybe almost 70%, which is really, starting to get up there. They only averaged 3.5 yards a rush, and they still put 41 points on the board.
They had a special teams touchdown. I know that.
Which Georgia's had quite a few of those over the season, so I wouldn't put that past Georgia. But it's just that was not a crazy dominant performance from a quarterback, in my opinion. I think it proves that they could go out and play a great game and win. I think that some of the other games that they played during the season, and I'm pointing at the Alabama-Auburn game, if they would have had a better quarterback, if Bo Nix would have done a better job in that game, they could have won that game. As a matter of fact, if Tank Bigsby just would have went down in bounds, they likely would have won that game.
Yes.
They had that game at near 100% probability. It's like 85% or something. With 4 minutes to go in the game, it was favored by wrong game. Excuse me.
Oh,
Alabama was, yeah.
I bet it was
Alabama
like 98
was
or 99.
Yeah, it was. They should have won that game instead of losing that game.
Not that I agree with the probability, but there's validity there. But they throw a lot of 99% on there, and I'm like, no, this is not 99%. I bet it was 99%. I bet they had 99% before that they had to give the ball back at the end of the game.
With 2 minutes to go, it was 4-1, and Trey Sanders runs for no gain. That made it 4th and 1. Auburn had according to ESPN, so take it with a jar of salt, had a 99.9% win probability. And so to me, I'm like, yeah, you should have won that game. I don't think Bo Nix had a very good game.
He didn't play.
It was TJ Finley. TJ Finley was playing that game, not Bo Nix.
He played on one leg. For one thing, he's not that good. Correct. Number two, he played on one leg.
And the crazy thing is that he was 17 for 26. So, he was still throwing around 65%.
Okay.
And not a dominant performance by a quarterback. Auburn's rushing. When I tell you the stats for this game, Auburn passing 137 yards. Auburn rushing 22. They could have won that game with less than 160 yards of total offense. So to say that Georgia doesn't have a chance in this game, I think you're ignoring way too much in the past.
All right, Brett. Well, we appreciate you being here. I don't know that you have too much more time, but if you do, if there's anything else you'd like to deliver before.
I think Ballard Sports Media has a question here. I have a question for Brett. Do you think the fact that UGA already lost to Bama is the big confidence booster because they can know what they did wrong the first time and turn it around? That's really a coaching aspect. I think that whenever you have a game where you lose, you do want to look at the tape, but you don't want to dwell on it. I think dwelling on it can be a big problem. I think what you want to do is go, okay, we made that mistake. Here's the adjustment we need to make, and we're going to move forward. I can 100% promise you that from the moment that that game was over, Georgia studied as much as it needed to study to beat Michigan, and then everything else has been studying and making corrections for Alabama. Georgia at no time was studying to see what it was going to take to beat Cincinnati. They were studying Alabama. Rob D is asking, when will the video with Dean Legge be up? Dean was actually traveling through some pretty rough weather driving up to Indiana. He just messaged me a little while ago. He said they're still traveling right now. That was at 1 o'clock, and they're traveling through 7 inches of snow. So yes, I'll be making that video with him once they get kind of settled. I don't think they planned for the Arctic apocalypse to drive through. So yes, but I appreciate you bringing that up. Thank you. To answer to who Dean Legge is, I don't know if you know who Dean Legge is or not.
I don't.
Dean Legge is not just a YouTube personality, but he's also a reporter, and he's on dogpost.com. And he's actually been in college football and doing college football so long that he gets a Heisman vote. He gets the vote on a Heisman winner. So we're going to be doing a collaboration with him, hopefully either today or tomorrow. But the guy's he's like Mark. He's just so busy. He's hard to catch him. So we're trying to get that worked out with him. But Mark's good people. We're working with Mark today. Mark has been gracious enough to allow me to do some other content on the Voice of College Football Georgia channel and the Voice of College Football SEC channel. So make sure that you not just subscribe to Mark's channel here, but subscribe to those other channels as well.
Perfectly stated. You should be a pitch man. Very nice.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
We really enjoy watching college football. Mark gets a unique perspective this year because he gets to continue analyzing and critiquing good college football teams, even though I personally think that Ohio State should have been in the number 4 spot. That's what I think. But I would have loved to have seen them go back. I will forever from now on until we play Ohio State be rooting for Ohio State versus Michigan just because of how friendly their fans were. So,
well, that's
I'm
nice.
now a quasi Ohio State fan.
Well, I think if we're just looking for the best 2 playoff games, we would have had Ohio State there. They didn't earn it. In no way did they earn it. But every metric in the country, and different people have football power index, and there are other ways. They all spit out the same teams at the top. And all you have to do is watch the Rose Bowl and watch other games and look at the recruiting rankings, look at the team talent rankings. They go Alabama 1, Georgia 2, Ohio State 3. I think they would have had a better chance. Michigan fans won't like this because Michigan whipped Ohio State fair and square. That's a legit win. I'm not discounting that win in any way. Ohio State would have had a kind of much better chance against Georgia. I still think Georgia's the decided better team. Ohio State struggled on defense this year. And I think that to watch that offense against Georgia's defense would have been something else. Ohio State would have had some serious issues on defense, but that they've got to clean up this offseason. But it would have been a fun one to see.
I also would have enjoyed, to be honest with you. I mean, you have to tip your hat to the College Football Playoff Committee for putting an undefeated Cincinnati Bearcat team in there, even if they thought they were going to get demolished, because at some point you have to say, if this is fair, we have to say, you're undefeated. That's really hard to do. We're going to give you a shot. Now, if it happens a couple of times where these teams continue to get blown out, then you have to kind of go, we can't really in good faith put you in this. Now, if that had have been the case, I will tell you the 3 teams that I had as a toss-up. I had Michigan, Ohio State, and Baylor. I think you take away the 1-2 point loss that Baylor had at TCU. I think this is a really good ball club. I think it would have been interesting to watch. And by the way, the team they lost to earlier in the season, Oklahoma State, they beat number 5 Oklahoma State at the end of the season. So now they and then they went out there and they beat a crippled up Ole Miss. But to me, I think Baylor has a really solid football team. They turned it around really well over there. So I'm looking forward to seeing what they can do next year.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, sir. Unless you've got anything else or see any other questions that are interesting.
Let's see. I will say that I think that the Saban knows exactly what changes Kirby will make and try to fix the problems he had with Bama a month ago. Saban has already been there and done that. Well, sir, if that was the case, he'd never lose a game ever. So he's the greatest college football coach of all time, but he is beatable. The same Alabama fanatic says, also Bryce goes against the exact defense has every day. So he knows where the defensive players are supposed to be at any given time. That's why the busts were exploited. That would be a legitimate statement, with the exception of having watched Auburn all year long. They should have known the exact defense that Auburn was going to run and should have scored way more than 3 points by halfway through the fourth quarter. So, how do I think Dan Lanning will do in Oregon? I think that Dan Lanning has an opportunity to be successful there. I think Dan Lanning is probably going to want to recruit defensive players because that's his mindset as a defensive coach. But I think it's going to be difficult to get the top defensive players in the country to go play in Oregon, just because that conference is not built that way. And when you're looking for defensive players, they tend to gravitate towards the SEC. Mike Sherman says, such a homer. Absolutely, sir. Absolutely.
So in terms of S. Hobson is, and this is a common, do we or don't we? You take your chance, in terms of blitzing a good quarterback. And if they pick up the blitz, then we're screwed. But we got to create a pass rush. Can we get home with 4? Obviously, they didn't in the first game. You don't want to be predictable, all those things.
I think that, how much more does Georgia blitz is a deeper question than just 6 words. There's multiple ways to blitz. There's corner blitz. There's, are you going to rush 5? Are you going to bring a linebacker blitz from the outside, from the inside? Are you going to bring the house? How are you going to blitz? How often are you going to blitz? What is the game plan is really the question. I think the game plan, more likely than not, is going to be that Georgia is going to play more aggressively. I think where Georgia was playing a little bit more contain than they were playing aggressive. I think they were trying to make him throw the ball and basically kind of create havoc. I don't think it worked well. I think that if that was the first time that Georgia hadn't, that was the first time Georgia really had not been able to get after the quarterback. And was that the first game where Alabama had success in keeping the quarterback clean? Yes. So I think because of those two things, you have to question how aggressive Georgia was. I think if Georgia goes back to a normal game plan where they're really trying to get after the quarterback, I think they'll be successful. I think the amount of the blitz that happened in the first quarter and a half are going to determine how they're going to play the rest of the game. What did this guy just say? Michigan would have played great against Alabama. Michigan didn't respect Georgia. Bama respects Georgia, and other teams did the same. The results would be different. Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. I think Michigan would have destroyed Alabama. I think it would have been 50-3 Michigan. You're absolutely right, sir.
Unless something leaves a player's mouth, we don't know who respects who. We can only guess who respects who. And if Michigan did not respect Georgia before that game, number 1, I don't believe that. Number 2, they would be complete fools. Number 3, maybe they didn't. And I just can't imagine. Then they're not paying attention to anything that's going on in college football. They're not paying attention to what's going on this season or what's happened in any other season. And not to be this simple about it, but if any team from any other conference doesn't respect a team from the SEC in a bowl game, but especially a playoff game, then again, they're not paying attention to anything that's going on.
I would agree. Michigan was, and I'm not trying to trash talk Michigan, and I really don't want it to sound this way, but at some point you have to call it like it is. Michigan was outclassed and outcoached. They just were. This was a bigger, faster, more dominant team, and the fact is that in this game, one of Georgia's defensive linemen, Jordan Davis, ran down the Michigan running back. Not caught, not reached out and stopped him from running up the gut. Jordan Davis punched through the line and then ran down and caught the running back. And he's probably 100 pounds heavier than the Michigan running back. That kind of dominant performance is really whenever I looked at the game and went, this game's over. Georgia's just bigger, faster, stronger. It just is.
Yeah, Michigan's best player on offense, and I somewhat remember that play, but I don't remember which running back it was. But Michigan's offense, their best offensive player, not most dynamic, but their best offensive player is Hassan Haskins, their bell cow of a running back, but he's a between the tackles running back. So he was pretty much eliminated from the game. Like, his usefulness against that defense is out the door. And they were just not, they weren't good enough. Of course, they were also just a bad matchup. Their strengths were not a good matchup, and their weaknesses were just blatantly exposed.
Now, one thing I do want to point out, because I'm sure there'll be some Michigan fans that come on here and watch this, and this, I do want to toot my own horn on this, because I caught a bunch of comments and a bunch of flack for this comment. I said Aiden Hutchinson was going to be a non-factor, and he absolutely was a non-factor. Georgia did exactly what I said they were going to do. I'm going to pat myself on the back for this one, because I've seen it happen before. Aiden Hutchinson, whichever side he lined up on, Georgia went the other way every single time. So all you have to do, if you have one elite player on the defense, which is, other than the cornerbacks are dedicated to a job. They're not going to be rushing the quarterback very often. They're just not. Aiden Hutchinson's job was get the quarterback. They would line up on the right side. James Cook would block him. He'd line up on the left side. Zeus would block him. It didn't matter. And they made him a non-factor in that game. So for those Michigan fans out there, I'm not saying he's a bad player. I'm just saying that Georgia had a game plan for him, and that's what it was, and it worked out to Georgia's favor. So,
yeah, he is still going to be a top 5 to 10 pick in the NFL draft. So, but they certainly took care of him. There's no doubt about that. Rob D, thank you so much for the list of quarterbacks that have beaten Nick Saban. So I am aware of all those players, but I still will just let you know I've got that type of mind. It's not brilliant by any stretch. I'm not selling it as brilliant, but I'm one of those that just keep an encyclopedic kind of Rolodex up there. So I know all those, but I appreciate you. Just because I just named a few and I didn't name all 16 that have beaten Nick Saban, but thanks for the rundown. I do appreciate it. Rob was trying to make the point that average quarterbacks have beaten Nick Saban.
Yeah, so I see a lot of people here talking about that. He's only had 16 losses in 9 years, something like that.
13
losses in 9 years. 16 losses in
13 years.
Nice. Well, he's the greatest college football coach of all time. I don't know what else to tell you, but here's what I will tell you. In 6 years, Georgia has only lost 15 games, and half of those roughly go to Alabama. You take Alabama out of that equation, Georgia's like 16-8. So Kirby Smart is absolutely a quality coach. I think he's averaging something like 12 wins a season. So he's not a bad coach at all.
Urban Meyer lost 9 games in 7 years at Ohio State. Dabo Sweeney, I just ran the numbers because I was doing some type of video. He lost 6 games in 6 years when they went to those 6 consecutive playoffs. So I'm not discounting Nick Saban. I believe that he's the greatest of all time as well. That's not what I'm saying, but I'm saying it can be done elsewhere.
Well, I do want to throw a little bit of salt on some Alabama fans. I think it's important to point this out. While Nick Saban looks like he's in his early 50s or late 50s, the man is 70 years old. I'm not sure how much longer he's going to coach football, because even at 70, I would imagine all of the traveling and up and down stairs and planes and all that other stuff, it's got to be tiring. So all you Bama fans that are out there jumping up and down, beating your chest, the clock's running. Kirby Smart's what? How old is Kirby Smart? 40-something years old? Let me check real quick. Should know this.
Kirby Smart. When was he playing with
46.
Georgia?
He's
okay,
46.
46. Okay.
So that means if Nick Saban retires in the next 2 years and then Kirby Smart continues to coach until he's 70, that means Georgia will have 22 years of Kirby Smart in addition to what they've had so far. That might be scary if you're an Alabama fan, because your reign of terror may be over sooner than you think.
Yeah. For Alabama, over the last over 70 years, basically 70 years, it's been Bear Bryant, Nick Saban. The period in between, I'm not going to say they were average, but they weren't that good. They were top 25 good. They were Ole Miss.
They were an Ole Miss. They were a Texas A&M. They were a Rutgers or a Wisconsin or whatever you want to call it. They were a good football team, but they weren't great.
Yeah.
Nick Saban showed up and put that program on the pedestal of performance. Very few teams. There's no one in the SEC that competes with Alabama for anything on a consistent basis except Georgia. LSU beat them one time, dominant performance, and what happened to that team? They fell apart, fired their head coach. Georgia continues to be dominant in recruiting. Georgia continues to play good football teams and win. I just think that the moment that Nick Saban retires, the SEC mantle is certainly coming to Georgia if it doesn't do so this time. So,
yeah, you would think so. That's the way it looks. Things change in college football. Jimbo Fisher's doing what he can at Texas A&M. That would be the one thread out there.
Yeah. So I guess Jeff Stapleton wants me to answer, how many SEC championship natties has Kirby Smart won? I think he's won 4 or 5 at Alabama, I think. So I think he knows how to do it. I think you were trying to be salty, but you didn't word your question properly. So Kirby Smart has several national championship rings. Now, if you ask me how many does he have at Georgia, I'd say none yet.
Yeah, we certainly need to give credit to assistant coaches. They do a lot of work, especially the coordinators. Of course, they're responsible for those teams as well. Those head coaches don't do it by themselves. So those we tend to credit national championships to the head coach and the players. And then there are these huge coaching staffs, and especially the coordinators that run the offense and the defense, that don't tend to get any credit.
So now I think this is a very interesting comment, because it gives me an opportunity to make one of two people look a little bit silly. If you are an Alabama fan who has ever touted the comment that Nick Saban's never been beaten by an assistant head coach or a former assistant of his until this year, yeah, he lost to Texas A&M, then you can't say statements like this that say, pretty sure Saban and Bama will be ready to pass the torch to the coach that Saban grooms to take over. The reason I say that is because if he could groom a coach to be as good as he is, then that coach would be able to beat him at least 50% of the time. So what ends up happening is that whoever he grooms to take over, you have to admit he's not going to be Nick Saban good. If that was the case, one of his predecessors would have already have done that. So he's likely would be as mediocre as anybody else, and I don't think there's a head coach who's had as near as much success as Kirby Smart that's previously worked for Nick Saban.
There are 3 programs that over the last 10 years are maintaining a 90-plus winning percentage. Alabama, Ohio State, and Clemson are winning over 90% of their games. That's not sustainable long term. Now, Alabama has received more opportunities, plus they've, to their credit, taken advantage of those opportunities to win national championships more so than the other 2. But it's just not the all-time winning percentage leader it's like right here and here, Alabama and Ohio State, and it's 73%, winning 90-some% of your games. It's just not sustainable. Now, what Nick Saban's done is just beyond incredible. That's not what I'm saying, but he is 70 years old. I do look at 70 years old differently today than I did 15 years ago. I will say that, in it not being like the end of the line, that if somebody told me Nick Saban is coaching Alabama at the age of 77, I'd say, wow, okay. I'll believe it. Tom Brady's throwing a football in the NFL at the age of 44. Nobody thought that was going to happen. So I wouldn't be surprised if he was done in 2 years. I wouldn't be surprised if he hung around for 6 or 7.
And when you're looking at how much longer he can go, you have to factor into just to be realistic. When you have a coach like Nick Saban, and he's 70 years old, I know he loves college football, obviously, but at some point you got less ahead of you than you got behind you, and you've got to say, well, what do I want to spend my remaining time doing? And at some point, I'm sure Nick Saban's going to want to try to enjoy the rest of his life without college football, without the headache of the running around and the coaching and the recruiting and the press conferences. Lord knows this man hates press conferences. I just think that at some point he's going to throw the towel in and be like, all right, I'm done. So it's one of those, how much longer is he going to stay?
I know when I think about retirement, I think about some kind of balance. I think about, I don't want to be like sitting on a rocking chair on a porch all day, but I also don't want to, these coaches, I think people lose sight of these coaches. Their schedules are insane. They are like the week, typically you'll see on SEC media days when that's kind of the unofficial start of the season. Conference media days for 4 days, and the coaches and their selected players show up and they go through the media rigors, and they'll all talk about their vacations. They'll get asked about their vacations. And you basically come to realize that they basically slammed in a vacation right before that started. Like sometime in early July, they got around, because when we're not thinking, which I'm thinking college football every day, but when most of the public's not thinking college football and thinking June, nobody's doing anything. Like the off season's not an off season. Transfer portal, recruiting nonstop all the time. These players are working out all the time. They're on campus. Spring practice is a long deal. There's winter workouts before that. They have individual workouts during the summer. They have August camp. They are running camps during June. They're working all the time. They'll catch like a long weekend, and that's their vacation. That's it.
Yeah. Well, and here's the other thing is that a lot of people don't understand that not only does the coach have to go to every practice that the players are at, they also have to deal with off-field problems like behavior, grades. That's a whole nother ball game that takes up time. Plus, they have a whole nother ball game where they have coaches meetings where they just deal with the coaches, and they have to recruit coaches because they lose coaches every year. So that's additional time they got to have. Then you've got to throw in the fact that You've got coaches that go recruit these players in person, like when you fly a helicopter and land it on the field at a high school football game. It's a lot of coordination and time that has to go into that. And then he sits there and he watches the whole game. The recruiting aspect's huge. These coaches really don't have a lot of time, and that's draining on the body. Bama Fanatic says, that's the disconnect, BDB. You think he's not enjoying what he's doing? We can't understand what makes the elite tick. Could a man have that type of success over the period of times if he didn't enjoy it? Yes. Yes, he could have that if he didn't enjoy it. He can be driven by a different factor that doesn't necessarily make him enjoy it. You will never, ever, ever convince me that Nick Saban enjoys press conferences. You're not going to make me believe that. He hates them with a passion. And if you don't believe me, watch somebody ask a question to Nick Saban that he thinks is a stupid question. One of the ones that dials up in my memory is that he asked, a reporter asked him, what are you guys going to do different in the next game? And he goes, actually, we were just about to call the defensive coordinator of that team and tell him our entire game plan. So I'm going to have to leave the press conference so we can forward him over to playbook. Of course, I'm not going to tell you. So does he enjoy the players? Yes. Does he enjoy the coaches? Yes. But at a certain point, what I'm getting at is that how much does that enjoyment weigh against what his body can take? And there's going to be a point there where no matter how much he enjoys it, skydiving and rock climbing is just not on the agenda this week. And what you do as a head coach is very taxing. It just is.
It sure is. There's no question about that. There's no question about that.
Saban doesn't want to retire. This is what makes him happy. That may be true. That may be true. 70's the new 50. I like it. I hope that's the case by the time I get there.
I do too. I hope it, because I'm getting my way there. So yeah, you get some people riled up with the Saban comment.
That's part of the fun of what we do, is if we just sit here and we just talk about, Kirby Smart's 65 and 15, everybody can look that stat up, but a lot of people enjoy a good razzing from time to time. And I'm one of them. People make comments. I've been called big mutt bread. I've been called all kind of things. I think it's just part of what we get to do. Joe Paterno coached until he was 80 years old, so it is possible. It is possible. There's folks that have lived to be over 100, but it doesn't mean that that's what Nick Saban is going to want to do.
So when Joe Paterno and Bobby Bowden, and I don't know their ages, but I'm almost positive that they're almost exact, and they coached almost until exactly the same time. If you look at their programs mirrored their deterioration. So their programs were not at their height when those guys coached their last 5 or 6 years. Their last 5 or 6 years, Florida State and Penn State were still good, but they were like 8-4, 9-3 good. They weren't anywhere near there. And I think that very much had to do with their coaches grinding to a halt.
Well, at a certain point, it's like Michael Jordan. Whenever Michael Jordan retired the first time, he said he wanted to retire. He wanted to go out on top, and he did. He retired. When he retired, he was obviously the top of the best, the best of the best. And when he retired, that's what he wanted to be remembered as. Well, then a few years go by, he misses, basketball, and he comes back, and he's not the same player. He just wasn't. I love Michael Jordan. He's my favorite basketball player of all time. I think the fact that Wilt Chamberlain is still spicy towards Michael Jordan should tell you everything you need to know about how good Michael Jordan is. Wilt Chamberlain doesn't talk about LeBron James. He doesn't talk about Kobe Bryant. He talks about Michael Jordan. To me, that's where I'm at with Nick Saban. I would rather, and this is not as a Georgia fan that doesn't like Alabama. This is doesn't like Nick Saban. This is a college football fan who loves watching elite players and elite coaches do what they do best. Without those guys, the game wouldn't be worth watching. It'd be a bunch of silly people running around not knowing what to do. I would rather see Nick Saban go out on top with basically an unblemished record of perfection that he's had than him all of a sudden start playing and having 6 and 7 win seasons, because I think that would take away from his legacy.
Spaghetti Factory, I appreciate the correction there. And when I state things, I state them in general. So I think you've been watching. So Spaghetti Factory, he watches on a regular basis. I assume it's a he. I shouldn't do that. They watch on a regular basis. And so you should know Spaghetti Factory. I can tell you off the top of my head Penn State's record every year. So I know what I'm saying when I say something. I know exactly I know that they lost to USC in the Rose Bowl by 2 touchdowns that year. I know that they were undefeated until they lost to Iowa that year. I know that. I was speaking in general. Yes, they popped up and had a nice season in 2008. They went to the Rose Bowl. But I was speaking in general. If you took Joe Paterno's last 6 or 7 years, they're basically like 8-4. That's what I was stating.
Yeah. John Delane, you're sorry. John Delane, you're absolutely correct. Whenever I made that statement I think that unknowingly, at first at least, Mark had tossed me in and to a Michigan chat stream. I didn't know it. And so whenever I said they would make Aiden a non-factor, the chat got lively. They were not excited about that comment. I'm still waiting for all of those people to come back and apologize, patiently waiting, and I might as well be patiently waiting because it'll likely be a while.
And that's the unfortunate thing about it. You know, I hope everybody can take a little ribbing, little trash talking. You know, I make a comment on here all the time, and on the surface, it doesn't make any sense because I say trash talk, but respectfully, which makes no sense. Obviously, but with the basic point, you know, don't offend somebody like personally, don't attack them personally. But when it comes to trash talking among college football fans, that's why we're here. That's what we want to have happen, and that's perfectly fine. But at the same time, we would hope that everybody would have enough thick skin to be able to take that, you know, your team's going to lose a game and you're going to have to put up with it, and you're going to have to, and just show up again. And, you know, you'll gain a little respect actually, if you would just show up, win or lose.
So absolutely correct. For me, and this is what I keep telling people. Whenever you have a platform and you're giving your opinion, we give an opinion in an environment where there is going to be a winner and there is going to be a loser. There is no way to split the fence. You have to pick one. You have to pick. And you're at some point going to be wrong. You've still got to show up and keep going after it. And so you have to be willing to say, yeah, we lost that game. Still love my team. Just like Michigan fans, their team lost. They still love their team. Just like Alabama fans who lost against Texas A&M. They're not afraid to tell you they're going to beat Georgia. Yeah, we lost against Texas A&M. That doesn't mean anything. We're going to beat Georgia. So for a Georgia fan to say, well, you guys beat us last time, that doesn't mean anything. We're going to beat you this time. That's just the way that's going to go. So you have to be willing to absorb the trollisms, in which I think the trolls make the chat exciting. I think they make it entertaining. I'm not afraid of it. It doesn't bother me. I sleep just fine. So with my channel, I'm a little more, what's the word I'm looking for? I won't say edgy. I'll say a little more tongue in cheek when it comes to the comments I make. And it's because there's people out there that they enjoy that aspect. I love to get into the stats, and I also love to kind of troll fans a little bit. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, for some reason, a couple of weeks ago, I just had a run of Clemson fans that were just all over me for about 4 or 5 days in a row out of nowhere, just claiming that Clemson was underrated and you underrate them and everybody underrates them. And I pretty much shot down everything that they had to say. And it was kind of funny because at one point, what made me think of it is you using the term troll, because at some point in this exchange, they used the term troll and they called me a troll. And I'm like, you originated a tweet. You put me on the tweet. How am I trolling? You targeted me with a tweet. That's not trolling. Do you know what trolling means?
Trolling is whenever you're in the comment section over here and you say 1980. That's trolling. You're trying to elicit a response. And the interesting thing is that, do you think that as a Georgia fan who has been on YouTube for 5 or 6 years, that's the first time I've heard that? I've had people private message me all kind of interesting things, and my typical response is that you have the unlimited resources of the internet, and you also have unlimited time to come up with something interesting that I haven't seen or heard or responded to, and 1980 is the best you can do. Sir, I refuse to engage in a battle of wits with an unarmed or unmotivated person.
Exactly. Yeah, it is funny. It is funny because these Clemson fans were all up in arms because they were claiming that their team and their program is underappreciated. Everyone underrates them all the time. And so my first comment was simply, when people make statements, either I can verify it and say absolutely, or I can say, no, you're wrong and this is why, or there's a whole bunch of statements in the middle where I need some clarification. And so sometimes there's this, we're underrated, we're this. Okay, where are you getting this from? Underrated by who, and what's your evidence? And then all I got was, well, we always get put down by the man and we're underrated. I'm like, I want some evidence. What are you talking about? So then they said, well, that ESPN never rates us highly. And I said, well, one thing I can say is that, and I'm no defender of ESPN, but that I know that guys like Pollock and Herbstreit and those guys predict Clemson to go to the playoff about every year. I don't know how that's being underrated. And then I showed them the preseason top 5 every year for 7 consecutive years. And I said, you're ranked in the preseason top 5 every year for 7 straight years. How is that being underrated? And so then they turned to Vegas and said, Vegas underrates them all the time. So then they cherry picked scores from the playoffs. They didn't show all of them. They just cherry picked a couple where they were an underdog and they won. Like they're an underdog against Ohio State and they beat them. Oh, big deal. But I took all the playoff scores and you're a touchdown favorite against Ohio State and you lose by 3 touchdowns. Is that being underrated? Really? You're a 4-point underdog against LSU and you lose by 18. That's being underrated. Oh, and I went through you're a 6-point dog against Alabama in 18 and you lose by 18 or in 17. I went through the whole thing, and most of them they were actually over evaluated. And it just went on and on from there. And it was just, and then so their conclusion was the best they could do was call me a troll at the end of all of that.
When logic fails, result to personal insults. I think for the first 3 years of my channel, I got called fat. And I always responded with, I fail to understand how my physical appearance has anything to do with the logic of the argument. And I have asked people that make comments like that, please come on the live show. I will let you in the chat. We can do a live back and forth. I would love to have you. And nobody has ever taken me up on it. And I think that's because a lot of people, whenever they troll you like that, they know that their arguments hold no water or they can't defend them properly. So they result to a personal insult. To me, the moment that somebody calls me a troll or a mud or any of those things, that's in my mind, I just smile because I know I've already won the argument. I've already won.
That is a horrible thing when anybody gets attacked for their physical appearance. That just drives me crazy because anybody can get made fun of for their physical appearance.
Yep.
Unless they're, I can't think of her name. But anyway, practically anybody in the world, I can, you can't, we can all make fun of each other based on our physical appearance. And it drives me nuts. And if somebody does it to me, I don't care. I laugh. and but I don't want that for my guests. Sometimes I'll have 3 guests on, and I'll see some comments made about their appearance, and that just really drives me insane. Then the other thing that comes to mind when you say that is there's a particular guest that I have on, and just because his appearance, just a headshot, you would think that I would be in better shape than him. But and he, just because, again, of his appearance, his workout would just destroy me, would just kill me, would put me to shame. He's in so much better shape than I am.
So I am 6 foot tall. I am 275, and we had this thing called the Slob Olympics. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. It was something that a bunch of us college YouTube content creators got together and did.
I was invited.
Okay. I won that.
Nice.
And you see this big trophy right here?
Yeah.
That's my name right there on that trophy. Nice. That shows that, and I've got to take that back to we're gonna be at Pigeon Forge in March to do the second Slob Olympics. In the Slob Olympics, we had the push-up contest, the 40-yard dash, a shoe toss for Florida.
I didn't know you did all that stuff. Nice. Yeah.
Played cornhole. We had an IQ test, like a legit online IQ test. We had a spelling bee, paper, rock, scissors, kick a field goal, throw passes. Like, we had a whole gamut of stuff. And I won it pretty decidedly. And there were some guys there that was in pretty good shape. Nobody did more push-ups than me. Nobody ran the 40-yard dash faster than me. And to me, the thing that I keep trying to explain to people is that just because somebody is bigger doesn't necessarily mean that they're what's the word I'm looking for? They're out of shape or fat or any of those things. I'm trying to find something here so I can show you.
Yeah, if that would have been a little bit more convenient for me, but coming from Connecticut down to Georgia for the Slop Olympics, I appreciated the invite, and I would love that. This may give me some motivation to show up for this one if I get invited again. But
I'm sure,
because a football throw and push-ups and all this other stuff sounds fun. Cornhole.
It was a lot of fun. The next one, like I said, will be in Tennessee. We had an absolute blast. Some people came down and spent the night. Some people, like me, I lived so close to Atlanta. I just drove up for the day.
Yeah.
And we had a tremendous time. I'm trying to find a picture here. Where is it at? I just showed somebody this picture, and now I can't find it again. So I will go back 1 year, and I'll show you this picture, which is probably not going to show up real well. I don't know if you can see how well you can see that, but this is a picture of me holding up 3 of my kids.
Oh, okay, shoulders. Yeah.
I have one of this past year. I do it every Father's Day. My son is 18. My daughter is 15. My youngest son is 3, and our baby was 10 months at the time or something like that. And I'm holding all 4 of them on my shoulders off the ground. The point is that just because somebody looks like they're a overweight, obese person doesn't mean that they are. Every time I go to the doctor and I get a checkup, they hand you paperwork when you walk out the door that if you're at such and such height, but you weigh such and such, that you're considered to be obese. And I asked the doctor, I was like, how come, I can bench press as much as I can, and I can run as fast as I can, and I can squat as much as I can. Does that make me obese? And he goes, well, it's because of your weight and your height. And I just thought, man, that's the image that we put out to the public, is that just because somebody's bigger, they're morbidly obese. According to the standards, most offensive linemen are morbidly obese. Most defensive linemen are morbidly obese. And these are athletes. So I always caution people on judging somebody on their appearance before they know more. 5'7" and 320 and can hold 6 kids. That's impressive.
Uh,
That's impressive. But I don't know. I just think that in college football, we kind of give people sand on things we shouldn't give them sand on. But as far as the trash talk and the trolling, I love that. It's my favorite part. Finished sixth in the Slob Olympics. K-Dog did. Yes, he did. Yes, he did. K-Dog's good people.
so how many people did we have show up for the Slop Olympics, roughly?
I want to say actual participants.
Yeah.
I want to say there was like 25.
Really?
20, 25, somewhere in there.
I don't know, 25. You out of well, there's really only two that I know that I don't know if I got my invite from Uncle Lou or from Pigskin Pete, one of the two.
Yeah,
But,
there was me, Pigskin Pete, Uncle Lou, BVD. I think Uncle Lou and BVD is the ones who kind of started it. Chess Hall, K-Dog, Caleb, C-Dog was there. He's a Georgia Tech guy. Golden Blue Dude was there. Celine Driver was there. I think Nate the Great was there, but I'm not 100% sure. Law Tide was there. I think Ballard was there, but I can't remember specifically. Jesse J was there. And I think that's like 13 or 14 right there. And there was TikTok Chess Hall was there. Yeah, I mean, there was a whole bunch of people there. It was a lot of fun. D4 Sports was there. Forgot about him. Sorry, D4. But yeah, 18 participants. There you go.
I don't get around enough because I don't know any of those people. Golden Blue Dude, I just met about 2 or 3 months ago.
Yeah. Most of those guys are really solid guys. They don't I won't say that all of those guys are mainstreamed as much as say me or you might be, but they make some good videos. Ballard is he's been on my show a few times.
I know Ballard. Okay. Yeah. Ballard called last night. Yeah.
So it's pretty good.
Cool.
Vodka Drinker. Vodka Drinker's on my channel quite a bit too.
That's cool. That is cool. All right, folks. I think we will just about wrap it up. Appreciate Big Dog Brett being here. Well, thank you so much, Brett. Appreciate that.
Oh, my pleasure.
And you can catch Brett's work again. Big Dog Brett, his YouTube channel, also helps us out here at the Voice of College Football, mostly on our SEC channel. So we appreciate him supplying us with some content there as well. So we will be awaiting your prediction, and I will make mine as well some point here in the next couple of days.
Wonderful. I appreciate the opportunity. Thanks again, Mark. And for everybody in the chat, whether you're a troll or whether you're a Georgia fan or you just want to be a Georgia fan for a weekend, I appreciate all you guys that engage with us and sign up on all the channels that we put content out on. Mark does great work. I enjoy working with Mark. And if anybody ever has any questions about college football, about their team specifically, it doesn't have to be a Georgia question. Feel free to reach out to me on my channel and on Twitter. I respond to just about everybody, so long as it's not something vulgar. So I much appreciate the opportunity, Mark. I really appreciate you guys. Thank you so much, guys.
Have a great day. We'll see everybody else later. We've got a West Virginia show coming up at 8 o'clock Eastern, so catch us then.